For millions of years, they hid in the ocean's darkest depths, but now, ancient creatures are rising to the surface, and their return may be a warning for us all. Would you like me to also shape this hook into a spoken-style intro, timed for 20-25 seconds, so it flows naturally at the very start of your video? Subscribe Deep Time Earth now to explore Earth's deepest mysteries and hidden truths. The first strange sightings. In the past few years, the ocean has begun whispering secrets it had long kept hidden. Fishermen hauling in their nets have looked down in disbelief, not at the familiar silver shimmer of tuna or mackerel, but at the pale, ribbon-like body of an oarfish stretching across the deck. Divers exploring coral reefs have found themselves face-to-face with creatures that belong more to ancient illustrations than to modern science. Squid the length of a bus, their tentacles curling like cables in the water, their eyes wide, unblinking and alien. Even beachgoers, wandering along the shoreline in search of shells, have stumbled upon armored fish washed ashore, beings so strange they look like relics carved from stone, not flesh. At first, these encounters feel like accidents, a one-off event, a freak of nature caught in the wrong current. But as the reports grow in number and frequency, the pattern becomes undeniable. Something is happening beneath the waves. These are not new species recently discovered by science. They are survivors from another time, creatures that carry the fingerprints of Earth's distant past in their scales, bones, and blood. Some of them date back millions of years, their ancestors swimming alongside dinosaurs, surviving cataclysms that wiped out entire ecosystems. There's an unsettling beauty to their return. On one hand, the awe is undeniable. To see such beings alive, after existing only in dusty textbooks or faded fossil records, is to feel connected to a time far older than our own. Yet, alongside the wonder is fear. Why now? Why are these beings, so perfectly adapted to the crushing darkness of the deep, appearing at the edges of our world? Are they simply lost wanderers, displaced by chance, or are they messengers of a deeper transformation unfolding beneath the surface? For centuries, humans have told stories of monsters from the abyss. The leviathan that swallowed ships whole, the kraken whose tentacles could drag sailors to their deaths, serpents that writhed in stormy seas, their bodies breaking the horizon like the spines of mountains. We once dismissed these stories as myths, colorful exaggerations passed from one frightened sailor to the next. But myths often carry fragments of truth. And when we see a 30-foot oarfish wriggling on the sand, shimmering in silver and black, it is difficult not to imagine those ancient legends coming alive. Unlike myths, however, these creatures cannot be ignored or explained away as imagination. They are here, undeniably real, captured not just in stories but in photographs, videos, and scientific reports. Their sudden appearances are a call to attention. Something in the depths has shifted, and the ocean is revealing a glimpse of it through the bodies of its most is a world apart, a place where light does not penetrate, where pressure would crush steel, its inhabitants locked away in an eternal night. Now, pieces of that night are rising into the day. It forces us to ask unsettling questions. Have these creatures always been surfacing, unnoticed by the wider world until our cameras and social media caught them in the act? Or has something changed in the ocean itself, pushing them upward, stripping away the veil that once concealed them? Is the sea trying to tell us something through its oldest inhabitants? Or are we simply witnessing the unraveling of balance to see them as ancient guardians emerging from the depths? But the truth is likely more complicated and more urgent. The ocean is changing. Warming waters, shifting currents, and human interference all reach into the deep. What once was stable for millennia is now in flux. And in this flux, the ancient guardians of the abyss are being disturbed, shaken loose from their dark refuge. Their reappearance is not just a story of biology or curiosity. It is a story of connection. These beings are part of Earth's history, survivors of eras we can barely imagine. They carry in their DNA the record of resilience and adaptation. But if even they, creatures that endured asteroid impacts and ice age, uncertain future. and itself, to the deep history that shaped them, and to the forces that allowed them to endure for millions of years. Only then can we begin to understand why they are here now, breaking the surface of our world, and what their return means for the future of our planet. The ancient survivors of Earth's oceans. Long before the first humans set foot on land, long before the earliest mammals even took shape, the oceans were already alive with extraordinary creatures. They swam through waters that stretched across a planet unrecognizable to us today. Volcanic skies, shifting continents, and vast seas formed the stage, while beings both strange and resilient filled the roles of survivors. Some of these creatures have vanished forever, their remains not alone. Horseshoe crabs, with their armored shells and blue blood, have remained nearly unchanged for hundreds of millions of years. The chambered nautilus, with its elegant spiral shell, is another reminder of evolution's endurance, a design so perfect it required no revision. These beings are often called living fossils, not because in that darkness, creatures perfected their survival strategies. Slow agriculture technology still struggling to understand. The persistence of these beings is also ocean has always been Earth's great stabilizer, a silent reservoir. Imagine a world that has known near constant temperatures for eons, waters so cold, so uniform that species adapted perfectly to survive without change. Now, warmer currents seep down, nudging those temperatures upward fraction by fraction. To us, 1 or 2 degrees may seem trivial, but in the abyss, where life evolved in absolute stability, it is like turning a frozen sanctuary into an unfamiliar, unstable realm. The fortress of the deep is no longer impregnable. It is being invaded, not by predators but by heat. Alongside the warming comes another invisible threat: oxygen depletion. Warm water is lighter and holds less oxygen. The natural circulation that once allowed oxygen-rich waters from the surface to mix into the depths is breaking down. In many regions, the deep sea is slowly suffocating. For creatures accustomed to a delicate balance of oxygen, even the smallest shortfall can mean collapse. A fish that once thrived undisturbed is now struggling to breathe in its own home. Food chains, too, are breaking apart. The great migrations of plankton and fish that once rose and fell daily, the largest movement of life on Earth, are being disrupted. Phytoplankton at the surface, the foundation of the entire oceanic food web, suffer from warming waters and shifting chemistry. With less food filtering down, deep-sea dwellers are left with scarcity where once there was constancy. For species evolved to endure the abyss but not scarcity, desperation drives them upward. Once thought immune to our reach, is showing signs of strain. What refuge remains untouched? Our footprint has reached into the planet's most secret places. Plastic particles have been found in the guts of amphipods living 11 kilometers. In a way, the ocean has become a mirror. When its oldest creatures rise, they reflect the state of the planet back to us. They remind us that our actions reverberate across every layer of Earth, from the atmosphere we breathe to the deepest trenches no light can reach. These encounters are not coincidences, nor are they spectacles meant for curiosity alone. They are evidence, unfolding in real time, that the stability of the deep is unraveling. The lesson is as simple as it is sobering. If life that once survived unchanged for millions of years can be forced from its home in just a few decades of human influence, then no part of Earth is beyond our reach or beyond our responsibility. And yet, climate alone may not explain every appearance, every anomaly. The ocean is vast, masked by the vastness of the sea. But to the creatures that dwell in the abyss, animals that depend on pressure, stability, and the faintest of vibrations, this restless movement can mean upheaval, disorder, a place where silence itself feels eternal. Then, without warning, the ground shudders. A deep quake rips through the seabed, sending seismic waves racing through the water. To us, it might register only as a faint tremor or a distant headline. But for a deep-sea fish that sense settled, volcanic activity adds an even more dramatic disruption. Beneath the submarine volcanoes are more common than most imagine. In fact, the majority of volcanic activity on Earth occurs underwater, far from human view. When they erupt, They reshape the very foundation of the ocean floor. Towers of hardened lava form overnight. Plumes of scalding water and toxic chemicals burst from hydrothermal vents, turning the abyss into an alien storm. For ancient creatures, many of them unchanged since prehistoric times, these sudden alterations are more than disturbances. They are existential threats. A coelacanth hiding in rocky caves may find its shelter collapsed. A deep ocean crab clinging to hydrothermal vents may be forced away by rising temperatures or chemical surges. Even species adapted to extreme conditions can find themselves overwhelmed. The only option left is to move, to rise upward, leaving the abyss in search of safer waters. These migrations, however, bring them into environments they were never meant to occupy. When a giant squid appears in shallow bays, or when serpent-like oarfish wash ashore, it is often the end of a long journey driven not by choice, but by desperation. To coastal communities, such sightings feel like wonders or omens. To scientists, they are signs of hidden turbulence far below. And to the creatures themselves, they are the last resort of survival in a world literally shaking beneath them. The scale of this upheaval is not constant. At certain times in Earth's history, tectonic activity has surged, reshaping continents and oceans alike. Today, evidence suggests that in some regions, seismic and volcanic activity under the sea is accelerating. Whether this is part of long planetary cycles or a more immediate shift, its consequences ripple outward. Earthquakes trigger submarine landslides, burying habitats in clouds of choking sediment. Volcanic outflows alter the chemistry of the water, making once livable regions toxic. Entire ecosystems changed for millions of years. Such disruptions are particularly devastating. Their evolutionary strength, even endurance, falters. Their surfacing is not a spectacle, nor coincidence. It is displacement, forced by the deep restlessness of the Earth itself. It is worth remembering that humans have long linked sea creature sightings to seismic activity. In Japanese folklore, the oarfish was seen as a messenger from the deep, rising to warn of impending earthquakes. Coastal myths across cultures told of serpents or monsters appearing before storms or tsunamis. While ancient storytellers may not have known the science, their observations contained a truth. The deep and the Earth's tremors are bound together. When the core shifts, the ocean answers and its creatures reveal themselves. To imagine their experience is to confront a perspective alien to our own. For us, earthquakes are fleeting moments. For deep-sea dwellers, they are world-ending upheavals. Picture a realm where your navigation depends on subtle cues. Legends and myths come alive. For as long as humans have gazed upon the ocean, we have filled its depths with monsters. To ancient sailors, the sea was an endless void, its horizon a line between the known world and the unknown. They told stories of serpents longer than ships, of tentacled leviathans pulling men to their graves, of krakens so vast they could be mistaken for islands. These were not just tales of imagination. They were expressions of fear, wonder, and respect for a realm beyond human control. When we look back now, it is tempting to dismiss those legends as superstition. Yet, when an oarfish rises from the abyss, its body stretching like a silver ribbon, undulating just beneath the surface, it's hard not to see the resemblance to the sea serpents of old. When a giant squid is hauled from the deep, with eyes the size of dinner plates and arms studded with hooks, it feels as though a fragment of folklore has stepped into reality. The line between myth and biology begins to blur. Perhaps those myths were not inventions at all, but distorted memories. Imagine a storm at sea, a ship tossed in violent waves. For a fleeting moment, a serpent-like fish breaches the surface before vanishing back into the dark. For sailors without modern science, how else could they explain what they saw? A story is born and passed from crew to crew, generation to generation. Over time, the details stretch. The monsters grow larger, but at their core lies something true. A brief encounter with the ancient beings of the deep. These stories mattered. They carried warnings, shaping the way societies understood the ocean. The Leviathan in biblical texts, the Midgard serpent of Norse mythology, the Polynesian Taniwa, each represented the ocean's power, its ability to create and destroy. The monsters were symbols of chaos, reminders that the sea was not ours to tame. For coastal communities, myth and survival were intertwined. To fear the kraken was, in some way, to respect the ocean's mysteries. And now, centuries later, those mysteries are surfacing once again. The oarfish drifting into shallow waters, the colossal squid caught in fishing nets, the armored crustaceans crawling into camera lights. They are not inventions. They are real, ancient creatures forced into our view. Their presence feels like myth brought to life, as though the ocean itself is reaching back through time to remind us of the stories we once told. There is something profoundly unsettling in that reminder. Myths, after all, are not only about monsters, they are about meaning. They reflect our deepest fears of being powerless against forces larger than ourselves, of facing the unknown. When the ocean delivers its ancient dwellers to our shores, it stirs those fears again. It tells us that despite satellites and submarines, despite maps and data, we do not truly command the sea. It remains a place of awe and terror, exactly as it was for the sailors who spun their legends. Science explains much of what we see today. We know that tectonic shifts, climate change, and human disturbance drive these creatures to the surface. But knowledge does not strip away wonder. Instead, it adds another layer. To realize that these beings are survivors from worlds long vanished, that the coelacanth swims as it did when dinosaurs ruled the land, is to stand at the threshold of myth and reality. The monsters of storybooks were exaggerations, but their roots are alive, flickering in the form of flesh and blood survivors. In a way, myths were humanity's first science. They were attempts to understand, to explain the inexplicable. And like science, they remind us that truth is rarely simple. An oarfish may not be a sea serpent, but when it slithers through the water, shining in unnatural silver, it carries the same weight of mystery. A giant squid may not topple ships, but when its immense body appears from the deep, it echoes the kraken's shadow. The essence of myth lingers, bound to the creatures that inspired it. This is why their reappearance resonates so strongly today. In an age of satellites and algorithms, we like to believe that mystery is fading. Yet every time an ancient creature surfaces, it proves the opposite. The ocean is still larger than us, still stranger than we dare imagine. Myths are not dead. They are alive in the form of living fossils, in the movements of creatures we barely understand. And so, when people gather on beaches to stare at a washed-up oarfish, or when divers film a colossal squid drifting in eerie silence, the reactions are the same as they were centuries ago: awe, fear, and wonder. These moments connect us to our ancestors, to their stories of monsters rising from the depths. They remind us that we are not separate from history, but participants in a continuum where myth and reality meet in the dark waters of the sea. Transition. If legends are resurfacing, then the question grows larger. What does their return mean for the ocean and for us? The warning signs we cannot ignore. Every time an ancient creature rises to the surface, it is tempting to treat it as a spectacle, a rare event, a curiosity to marvel at before returning to everyday life. But to see these animals only as oddities is to miss their deeper message. Each one is a signal, a warning carved into flesh and movement, telling us that the world beneath the waves is changing in ways that can no longer be hidden. These beings are not ordinary messengers. They are survivors from the dawn of time, species that endured asteroid strikes, ice ages, and planetary upheavals. For millions of years, they remained secure in the deep, insulated from the chaos above. If such resilient creatures are surfacing now, it should make us pause. What has shifted so profoundly that even the guardians of stability can no longer endure in silence? In many ways, these encounters are like hearing the faint alarm of a distant bell. For miners of coal, it was the canary, a fragile bird whose sudden distress warned of invisible danger. Today, the deep-sea creatures are our canaries. When oarfish, squids, or living fossils appear where they should not be, they are telling us that something in the system is unraveling. Their distress mirrors the larger balance of the oceans, a balance upon which human life depends more than we often realize. Consider for a moment the ocean's gifts. It provides over half the oxygen we breathe. It regulates temperatures, storing and redistributing heat across the globe. It feeds billions of people and anchors economies. The stability of the ocean is, in truth, the stability of civilization. If the deep sea, once the most reliable and constant of ecosystems, can no longer shield its ancient residents, then it may no longer shield us either. The creatures that rise are not simply displaced. They are harbingers of a wider instability reaching up from the abyss into our own lives. When a coelacanth is found where none should be, when a squid emerges in shallow waters, it is not an isolated event. It is part of a chain, linking climate, geology, industry, and biology. We see only the tip, a creature out of place, but beneath that tip lies an iceberg of causes, each connected to the disruptions humans are driving. These encounters, rare as they may be, are warnings written in scales, shells, and ancient eyes. And yet we often fail to listen. The ocean has always seemed so vast, so indestructible that its signals are easy to dismiss. But history tells us otherwise. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen with the tides, their fates tied to the waters they depended on. Today, we are global, our reach spanning continents, yet our dependence remains just as fragile. If the ocean falters, the ripple will reach us all. The presence of these creatures, then, is not simply about them, it is about us. They remind us of a truth we prefer to forget. Humanity is not separate from nature, but embedded within it. Every action we take, from carbon emissions to drilling to pollution, reverberates downward into the abyss. And now, the abyss is reverberating back. Each surfacing is a mirror held up to our choices, showing us the cost of a path unchecked. This is why their return matters. It is not myth alone, nor science alone. It is a story of connection, of warning. These beings tell us that the earth is still alive, still reactive to what we do. They remind us that balance is delicate, and when it tips, even the most ancient survivors are forced from their homes. If we ignore these signals, we risk ignoring the very systems that keep us alive. To frame it another way, when the deep sends its messengers, it is not to frighten us but to awaken us. They are reminders, not punishments, signs that there is still time to act but not time to waste. Their presence on our shores is both a wonder and a plea. Wonder because they connect us to the living history of our planet. Plea because they show us what happens when that history is disturbed. And so, as we stand on beaches staring at ribbon-like fish or colossal squids, we must learn to read them not as spectacles but as signals. They are messages carved by evolution, broadcast through survival. To witness them is to be given a chance to change course, to reconsider how we treat the oceans, to remember that no sanctuary is infinite. Transition. And so we arrive at the central question: what must we learn and how should we act as the deep's oldest creatures rise once again? What the future holds. The reemergence of ancient ocean creatures is not just a spectacle to be marveled at. It is a mirror held up by nature, reflecting back our choices and our relationship with the planet we call home. Each oarfish washed ashore, each squid pulled from waters too shallow for its kind, is more than a biological anomaly. It is a question, one that asks whether humanity is prepared to listen, to learn, and to change. If we choose to,